Hey, tennis fans, you are listening to Match Point Canada, Canada's premier tennis podcast. I'm Ben Lewis, joined alongside Mike McIntyre. Miami Open officially in the books, clay court season officially underway.
And this week, we're happy to have back on the podcast to debrief everything from Miami, where he was for the first week of the tournament, Stephen Boughton, joining us from The Slice, a top-notch Canadian tennis podcast and YouTube channel. Stephen, great to have you back on. We respect your work so much and think that you add so much to the tennis landscape in our country. Thanks for joining us. I know you've had a busy day with your own tennis content, but thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it, guys. Mike and Ben, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the kind words. It is great to be part of the Canadian tennis ecosystem. That's small, proud. I would say extra proud in these days of, economic war, uncertainty in the world. I feel like after the Four Nations, and the great, some great showings by Canadians in Miami, we're all feeling extra patriotic, or at least I am.
Yes, only Canadian guests from now on. No, I'm just kidding. There's lots of wonderful guests from other countries, including the United States that, Pam Shriver actually spoke to me the other day and lent her sympathies to us up here in the North. So I appreciated that.
There's a lot of that, yeah.
And, regardless of what's going on there, Stephen, we've always really admired your work and feel that we're all on the same side. We're all trying to do the same thing, which is raise the profile of the sport here in our country. And you've done such a great job with that. Let's look at Miami and your first week there. The venue, the level of organization, just your take on the event from your perspective with the media. I think in your week one video, you called it something of a rental event or rental tournament venue, which it is. But does the site work for you as a tennis enthusiast?
Yeah, I would say good question, and I'll be as blunt and honest as I can with things here. So I would say when you get to the venue and you're out on the grounds, I like the vibe. I've been to most of the Masters 1000s at this point, and the Miami Open vibe is fun. There's enough space in the common area between the different like practice courts, main courts, that you can move around, and it's good. The rental aspect of it is in the stadium. So like for those of you who haven't been there, there's the Miami Dolphins massive stadium. Like essentially a quarter of it is used for the tennis. So that just, lends itself to a bit of chaos, I think, from an organizational standpoint. So my first year going there, 2019, which is actually its first year there, I remember walking around behind the scenes and they didn't have really anything sorted at that point. So you were just like bumping into Federer or whoever. Like there's just like,
Well, that sounds
media,
awful.
Media, yeah, that was all. Media players, everyone was kind of mixed. It's gotten more organized now. So I would say in general, from a media perspective, it's pretty nice because they have way more space actually than a lot of these other events. From a fan perspective, I would say as far as like practice viewing and things like that, I would put it pretty far down the list actually. As far as it's just like they only have 3 kind of courts that you can watch practices, and similar to the U.S. Open, there's like a big stretch where you can't go between the courts at all. You can only sit at one end, so there could be Djokovic could be like 4 courts down and you can't see it. So not the best in that sense of things. And then from getting to it, I do think it's I had like a nice parking pass with the media credential, and so I could kind of get in there, but it's a bit in the middle of nowhere in Miami, and so you have to come park, and then people are taking like shuttles from the parking to the stadium, and then they were queuing, and then they get in there. So it seems there is its issues with it being a rental because it's not a full-time year-round tennis venue. But in general, we were just talking about it on our podcast. The vibes are incredibly high, and it's like a fun tournament. Like it's a more rambunctious than a lot of the other ones.
Definitely plenty of fun matches. Like if we talk about the tennis itself, Aryna Sabalenka winning the women's title. But honestly, to me, we'll talk about Sabalenka winning. But I thought the women's storyline was, of course, this Filipino girl, Alexandra Eala, who it felt like everybody's been kind of learning this name over the past couple of weeks. Had you heard anything about her? Did you get a sense of like the stardom breakout happening before our eyes in the past sort of week and a half? And what did you make of her crazy run to the semifinals? Like pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, totally unbelievable. No, to be honest, I had not heard of her really before this tournament. I did hear of her at the beginning, I think when she won her first round match, and I probably actually saw her on the main draw wildcard list because she got a wild card, and as well as Victoria Mboko, our Canadian, did both IMG clients, and then And then, you're hearing Alexandra Eala and you're hearing Coleman Wong, who they thought they were dating at one point. Turns out they were just friends.
Yep.
But they're both from from Asia and from, countries where they haven't had huge representation of tennis. And then, so as she started to just domino, take out these high-seeded superstar players, by the time she had beaten Keys and then Badosa and then Swiatek, you're just like, what is going on here? Like, this is truly crazy, because we've seen runs and we saw it on the men's side, Jakub Mensik coming through and winning the whole title, but he'd been around. He was in the ATP Next Gen tournament last year. He was a name that we knew he had talent. Winning a Masters 1000 against Djokovic is a different story, but Anastasia from the Grounds Pass podcast, who we had on ours, she'd actually been kind of tuned into her game before this, and she wasn't winning like back-to-back matches on the ITF coming into this tournament. Like, she wasn't winning anything really, and she got a wild card into Miami and then just goes on a run. So really one of the craziest runs I've seen in a while, kind of like Emma Raducanu-esque. And then from the Philippines, I was looking it up. They got 110 million people in the Philippines, and any content talking about her goes crazy because there's like an untapped market there of new tennis fans who are like, I've never watched any tennis, but I'm watching Alexandra Eala. So yeah, I think that kind of when the dust settles from this tournament, from the nitty-gritty, I think that will be the story of the tournament.
Yeah, untapped market, and definitely a big boost when she got a tweet and mention on Instagram from Rafael Nadal. Obviously, she's product of that Rafa Nadal Academy. I think that raised some eyebrows as well, like an incredible young talent. And Jessica Pegula, who beat her in 3 sets, compared her to Leylah Fernandez, which was a great takeaway. Kind of like that lefty style counter puncher, takes the ball really early. Great competitor. Beyond Eala, you mentioned Victoria Mboko, our teenage talent here in Canada. We're obviously so high on her, and we recently had her on the show as well. Mike spoke to her. What stood out to you watching her play, obviously getting that massive first-round win over Osorio and pushing Badosa the distance?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you guys had her on the podcast because she seems like a great person. And yeah, I think definitely a bright star for Canada in the future here. I watched her first round match versus Osorio. And it was a long match. It was a battle. And yeah, I had been, I kind of moved her. She was on court 1, which is where a lot of the Canadians played, which is funny. It was kind of like the Canadian court. Felix and Dennis both played there. But what stuck out to me about Mboko is she has obvious weapons, right? She's tall, she's strong, she has like these physical ability that a lot of the other players just aren't born with on the WTA. So she has the serve, which is very obvious, and the forehand. But I thought her game beyond that, her ability to stay in rallies and wait for the shot to come to her, honestly similar to like Jakub Mensik, the way he won yesterday. It wasn't just his huge serve. It was like he would, as the rallies got longer, he didn't like fade. Victoria in that match versus Osorio, who has less power than Mboko, and was like digging and really getting, showing Victoria that WTA like game level where it's like, oh, more balls are coming back to her than she has had on the ITF. She was able to stay in those rallies and she would hit forehand slices, backhand slices, kind of just she has every shot, it seems like. And that's what stuck out to me as far as like an exciting prospect, because there's having the big forehand, having the big serve, and then some people don't really have the ability to back it up, but I think she does, and her like athleticism like is very apparent through all those different aspects of the game. So the completeness of her game at 18 and her ability to go pound for pound with like Paula Badosa, because in that match it was like this close. Like Badosa by the end was getting pushed around a little bit more than Victoria was, and then it it could have gone either way, right? So, and that's a top 15 player on the WTA. So crazy showing from Mboko there. And I said this on our podcast, but Badosa was in the hallway in our hotel as I was leaving Miami, right before she, as she was leaving Miami, or as I was leaving Miami, and then I said, hey, Paul, I'm Canadian. I was at your match versus Victoria. Like, what do you think of her? And she was like, oh, incredible player. Like, I was like, she's like going to be at the top of the game very soon. Like, you guys got a good star. So,
and she certainly didn't have to say that either, right? So,
yeah, like she could, but like when she won that match, you guys probably saw when she won, she was like saying nice words to Victoria at the net, just like wow, incredible fight. And so, yeah, Victoria can hold her head very high after that tournament.
Nice for you to have been there too to see it. Not that, I mean, Victoria's not new to us, but just to be
Right.
there for her real coming out moment where, hey, the rest of the tour is going to suddenly take notice, I think. And Ben, I like how you introduced it by saying like teenage Canadian talent. Like, don't they all seem to start out and have that success so young from Canada? Shapovalov, Felix, Layla Annie, Bianca. You know, they don't wait, right?
Mhm.
They're ready for it at a young age, and hopefully she can continue to build on this too. Stephen, I want to kind of transition from some younger players that Ben mentioned to the veterans. Maybe it's because I'm the veteran between me and Ben on this podcast, but you know, these guys are still younger than me. And the first one is Novak Djokovic, who seems like he's, you know, back on track in some sense, but also looked visibly tired and behind a step to his much younger opponent in the finals, Jakub Mensik. Do you think this result for Djokovic and his fans is encouraging, or is it showcasing his vulnerability as he approaches the age of 38?
I think it's gotta be encouraging because you can't be comparing him now to the Novak of 5, 10 years ago, right? Like, that's a futile exercise. Like, I think you should be comparing him to 2 months ago, to his level when he lost 3 matches in a row and when he was injured leaving Australia, and the future was, like, kind of uncertain in my eyes. I was watching that match, I'm like, "Is that the last time we've ever seen him in Australia?" We don't know, right? So, he's won everything, like, where's his motivations at? But, in Miami, you saw him pretty locked in. So I would say, like, motivation seemed to be there. But then, yeah, like, to your point, Mike, in the final, he was on the ground multiple times,
Even
definitely
when he
showing
didn't
fade.
have to be, you know, even when he wasn't falling, but he was like catching his breath or
Just
taking a vomit, you
exhausted.
know?
Yeah.
For sure, for sure, and I mean, he's to be honest, I would be too if it doesn't matter how young you are, like, playing Jakub Mensik, just an insane physical specimen. Um, but yeah, like, so the question is, like, are you encouraged? I think you should be encouraged. His, like, level was there to get to the final of the Masters 1000. He beat Musetti and Dimitrov. Some people were saying he had a bit of an easier route, but he also just beat, Carlos Alcaraz at the Australian Open. You guys remember that? So his level's there. So and physically he's there too. So he lost to an opponent, but you'd rather see him lose while he's healthy. And he actually played a good match against Mensik, I thought. Like, he served well, he played good tennis. It was more like Mensik won that match to me than Djokovic losing it. Um, so yeah, I would be encouraged. Like, what did you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, if you were a Djokovic fan, you're encouraged he's back in the finals of a big tournament. That bodes well for the remainder of the season. I don't know what quite was going on with the eye or how that affected him a little bit when you saw
Yeah.
that heading in. I mean, it looked like he got socked in the face before the match there. It seemed to have subsided a little, I'm sure, with some treatment or medication or what have you. But he just looked older to me. You know, he just looked fragile a little bit and physically spent. And even though his previous matches had been straight setters, and again, like you said, on the other side of the court, you've got a young guy, 19 years old, who's fresh and could be. He looked like he could have played 5 sets, no problem. Encouraging if you're in the Djokovic side of things, I think for the rest of his season. We're going to switch to clay, where he's obviously very comfortable too. But physically, it's not getting any easier for sure, and that's understandable given his age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be glass half full with Novak, but I do still think you're right, Stephen. Obviously, we compare this to the past couple of months. This is the best version of Djokovic probably we've seen in 2025, apart from that win over Carlos Alcaraz in Australia. Where I do get concerned is when he's pushed the physical distance, and it just felt like the humidity in Miami got to him, and you look at his past slam results where things have gone wrong, his body has let him down. That's my worry about Novak, is a half step slower, physically spent just a little bit more when you're playing these incredibly, young physical players, the speed of like a Yannick Sinnerball, or just playing a talent like Jakub Mensik. Can he hold up, especially in a best of five format in a slam when we get there with Roland Garros and beyond?
That's almost like that makes it kind of more fun to me. It's like a new challenge if you're a Djokovic fan or if you're a Djokovic.
Yeah.
You won everything in tennis. So now how many big wins can you sneak out versus this freakish next generation of talent? Like, he got crushed by Alcaraz in the Wimbledon final last year. and he got the Olympic win. Like how that Olympic win, and he said it probably felt sweeter than many, if not most, of his major titles.
No, that
And
was
it's
worth
like,
more than so many of it, I'm sure, because that was
For sure.
the big
yeah,
last thing remaining, on his. And you said earlier, like, what is he still playing for? I don't know. He's got how many slams now? Is it 24 slams?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does he want 25? Because that's a pretty cool sounding number. Passes Margaret Court as well. Does
yeah.
he want 110 ATP titles to pass Jimmy Connors? I mean, those are both things that are certainly within his grasp still.
Yeah, and I just think, like, even if he's playing like Carlos Alcaraz or Sinner in like the quarterfinals of Masters, just like getting up for that match and be like, can I do it? I'm almost like, I think 38 now. Like, can I still beat these guys who are obviously the best in the world now? But like, he's a competitive person. All these athletes are so like internally competitive. I think that that's like a new challenge for him. So, and then why wouldn't he keep playing as long as he can, right? So these, like, Federer and Nadal both would have kept playing if they could.
If they could have, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. Okay, listen, internal competitiveness. Let's switch to another veteran player. And I want to ask you about one that you mentioned during the first week there, and that's Nick Kyrgios. He says he wants to commit to the sport again. From what you saw, can he still be relevant if he wants to be?
Yeah, it was from what I didn't watch either of his matches in person, but I was in the mix zone with him after he lost to Kachanov.
Yeah, so even from his
Kachanov,
comments, did you get the impression that he's legit wanting to give it a go here?
totally, yeah. So what he said there was, "I still feel like I have a lot of tennis ahead of me," which I was, like, surprised to hear. Because in my head, I was just like, he's kinda just showing up, like, collecting a check, like, that's what it seemed like to me, like, and after Australia, like, he wasn't able to win there and his level wasn't good. But then he came here, beat Mackenzie McDonald, and, I think he's a very, complicated person, right? And he would be the first one to say that. So he's done things, a lot I don't agree with. He's gotten on my nerves sometimes. I've loved having him in the sport. Like, he's obviously a net benefit to the sport as far as the talent he brings and the personality. But there's like a humanity in everyone, no matter what you think of Nick Kyrgios. And in that mix zone with the press, he's very respectful to all the press there. He was really introspective, being like, the reason I lost, or not the reason I lost, Khachanov's like in a much better form. He's has way more matches under his belt. But what Khachanov had and what these top guys had that I don't right now is like the mental toughness to get through these matches. He's like, I was looking at Khachanov, he's just like on the same level the whole match, no matter what was happening. And he's like, I blow up, like I lose this tiebreaker, and I was just mentally checked out for the rest of the match. Back in 2022, he was like, I was more mentally strong and I could like lose the first set and then figure out a way to win. So I really want to work on that. And I want to, so he's talking like he wants to play like years more in his career, which is he said in the past, I don't know if I'll ever play again, or I'm not going to be around forever, these things. So yeah, that was
maybe
very
he missed it.
interesting.
Maybe he missed it.
Difficult thing is he might change his mind in 2 weeks. You never really know with Nick Kyrgios as such a character. I want to get your thoughts, Stephen, on upcoming clay court season. Jannik Sinner, if we talk men's side, Jannik Sinner will be sidelined until Rome. Carlos Alcaraz has struggled with form in 2025. We just talked about Novak Djokovic, some new exciting young faces. Who are your eyes on in terms of the men's group? Like, who is sort of the odds-on favorite for you as we shift over to the clay, and who are the ultimate challengers as Roland Garros kind of approaches a couple months away or so?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I know what you mean about Alcaraz. So he's my guy, I think, going into clay. He's just not like, the hard courts has never been his favorite surface, and it hasn't been the most natural for him. So I just think he's gonna maybe get some of his mojo back being on the clay, and won French Open last year, won Wimbledon last year. Natural surfaces he seems to thrive on, mainly because of his movement, I think. Rafa Nadal always said the key thing for him in his game on clay is the movement, and Carlitos has that. So I'm looking to him. I think in the lead up events to Roland Garros, he's going to be awesome. I think Stefanos Tsitsipas though is like maybe sleeping on some people's radars, but I do think the racket change and his general confidence and game on clay should not be slept on. So like, it wouldn't blow my mind if he just came out and won Roland Garros. I mean, it kind of would, but it shouldn't. Like, if things had gone how we kind of, maybe he would have hoped it would have, he would have maybe had won it by now and he'd be like still in the top 5, but his confidence has taken a huge hit. But the racket change, it's lighter, he's got more sauce from the racket, and that's to me exactly what he's needed. I don't know what you think about that, Ben. I know you're a tennis coach, so it's like, but it's given him more power, more freedom maybe in his game. His dad's out of his box, and maybe he can just go forward and claim what's his, kind of, I think, which is like we always thought he would win the French Open. He was up 2-0.
He's been so close. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Very, very close. No, good point. That wasn't a name that maybe it should be in my mind. Stefanos Tsitsipas. It's true with the racket change. He's much more free and loose.
The results of late don't necessarily show that, but you know what I mean? It's more of like a vibe I'm getting from him going into this tournament with the racket change, but or this season, but yeah.
And getting rid of his dad, definitely, I think, a huge move for him. And I'd say the same for many tennis players out there, that at a certain point, it's time to cut the cord and seek some outside voices. I tell my kids all the time, when you've had enough of me coaching you in hockey, just say the word and I'll step aside.
They'll say that in one moment of frustration, then they'll want you back, maybe, because they're. But funny story for your listeners. In Stuttgart, Germany, I was at the 250 there, grass court, and I was sitting directly between Stefanos Tsitsipas' dad and essentially Andy Murray's coach. Stefanos Tsitsipas and Murray were playing a match. It's a tight match. Murray ended up winning, which was kind of like Stefanos probably should have won that match. And the whole, like, his dad's sitting right here beside me and his mom's sitting right behind him. And they're just like, we're all in, you can imagine relationships. Maybe you've heard your parents bicker or whatever, but it was just like, I don't have anything bad to say about it. It was just funny. Like, they were like, Apostolos would say stuff and the mom would say, stop it, Apostolos, don't say this. And he would just keep chirping at Stefanos, and Stefanos would be saying something back. And then Murray's camp's just sitting there just like, come on. And the Greek family over here is just having like a whole family like sort out in the middle of the crowd, which was chaotic, I think, a little bit. So yeah, nothing wrong with the family dynamic, but I think maybe a new flavor there is going to be good for him. So yeah,
nice strategic seating on that one.
Yeah,
Very good.
small is there wasn't much seating in general, so it was like almost not even intended.
Well, hey, Stephen, thanks for taking a seat with us today. I hate to cut it. It feels like short because I feel like we could go on and on. So maybe we need to continue this chat on the Slice one day soon, with both of us coming on and answering your questions as best we can. But thank you for today. Great to have you back with us here.
Yes, we
Thanks
will
so
do
much.
that, and I'm looking forward to this summer with you guys, hopefully up in Canada.
Yeah, hope to see you. That'd be great.
Get your butt over here to Toronto this summer.
Yes, we will try.
Thank you guys so much for watching us at Matchpoint Canada. If you like our work, follow along, hit the subscribe button below.